If some cop showed up at your door and asked you to prove that you were a citizen of your country, would you be able to? A lot of us would be able to. We'd probably have a passport or a birth certificate or something like that laying around, which would make it pretty simple. But some others wouldn't. In fact, globally speaking, most people probably can't. In many countries, for example, just a birth certificate isn't enough to prove your citizenship. And most people don't have passports. So if you're from a country that doesn't give birthright citizenship just based on being born in the country, you'll also need documents that prove your parents' citizenship, such as their birth certificates, their marriage certificates, their passports, their citizenship certificates, whatever. And if you can't manage to get direct proof of your parents' citizenship for whatever reason, like maybe you don't talk to them, you don't know where they are, they're dead, they just don't want to help you, they don't have the documents, whatever, that kind of puts you in a pickle, doesn't it? And if your parents, like you, don't have direct proof of their own citizenship, you'll also need to go back in the lineage and try to prove that your grandparents or your great-grandparents or whatever were citizens and that this citizenship was then passed on to their descendants. Confusing as hell, right? Most people living in the world today simply don't have such documents. Most people live in the same place for pretty much their entire life, which is just wherever they happen to be born. Unless they want to travel internationally and get a passport, there's rarely a need for them to get these sorts of documents. And depending on the nation that they live in, and especially those that don't have very organized bureaucracies, obtaining such documents might be prohibitively difficult or expensive. It can take years to apply for and receive every little thing that you require. And some people may even live their entire lives without knowing that they're technically not citizens, because someone perhaps 2, 3, or 4 generations ago migrated illegally and laid down their roots in this new country without ever formalizing their status. Something that was very, very, very common up until mere decades ago, by the way. So they had no citizenship to pass down. So their descendants, despite having lived in the same country, probably in the same location, for their entire lives, are technically not citizens of that country. So imagine again those cops at your door. You've lived here your entire life, you speak the language, you have the same culture as the cops and as your neighbors. This country is your home and you are of this nationality. But they don't care about that. All they care about is the proof that you are a legal citizen, that you fit into this specifically legal category. So let's say that you live in a relatively poor area and you don't really have much documentation regarding your identity in the first place, let alone the means to prove your citizenship. How I was born in a first world country and I had no proof of this sort of thing until I was like 25 years old. And it took me like a whole year to get it. Imagine how much more difficult or expensive it would be without the resources that I had or the more refined bureaucracy. So you have no way to abide by the demands of the cops, and let's say that you also have a neighbor who doesn't either. They take both of you away. The cops hand you over to immigration officials who then try to verify whether you're a citizen or not, but it turns out that according to them, both you and your neighbor are not citizens. Who knows, maybe it's because there's just no records of your ancestors in official databases, which could simply be explained by the fact that worldwide a lot of people just kind of live informally. Or maybe at some point in the last 60 or 70 years or whatever, your great-grandpa just walked over a border, and so your family ended up where they are today. Both of those are things that you cannot control. Nevertheless, you're going to get punished for the original sin of the guy you've never met who probably died before you were born. You're going to be thrown into a so-called detention center, probably indefinitely, because now you're also stateless, meaning that you have no citizenship in any country, since it's going to be even more impossible to prove that you are a citizen elsewhere, so there's also nowhere to deport you to. Your neighbor has the exact same problem as you, but he's not going to be thrown into immigration detention or deported or anything, because he's Hindu, or Buddhist, or Jain, or Sikh, or Christian. So he gets handed citizenship. You're a Muslim though, and Muslims are excluded from the pathway to citizenship that is available to your neighbor. So practically everyone who isn't a Muslim who cannot prove their citizenship is going to end up being handed it. All that they have to do is claim that they or some ancestor in their past had been persecuted for their religion in a neighboring country. So these immigration detention centers are going to be full of nothing but Muslims. This is what's happening in India right now. This is why there's protests all over the country, and this is why the government is massacring people. The Hindu supremacist BJP party, led by President Modi, is using the cover of citizenship to purge the country of as many Muslims as possible. This would be bad enough already if they were just doing it to all people who couldn't prove their citizenship, but the fact that they're specifically excluding Muslims and offering amnesties for pretty much everyone else in the same situation just takes it to another level. Let's look at the legislation. The Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019 passed in December. It amended the Citizenship Act of 1955 by providing a path to Indian citizenship for illegal immigrants of Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, Jain, Parsi, and Christian religious minorities who had fled persecution from Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan before December 2014. Muslims from those countries were not given such eligibility. So, vague terms in order to receive citizenship that are explicitly based on religion. This is combined with the National Register of Citizens, an old measure from 2003 which has been brought back into prominence by the Modi government. It aims to create a National Registry of Citizens so that anyone who cannot prove their citizenship can be easily deported. That's already bad enough. But the fact that it's going to be specifically targeted at Muslims is obviously quite a bit worse. And currently they're building masses of so-called immigration detention centers around the country for this very purpose. Despite the terminology used there, in reality, these are specifically concentration camps for Muslims. So India has an actual fascist government that's already rounding up its designated other. And you know what? They're already further along with this than the Nazis were in the 1930s. The Nazis first deprived people of citizenship and then the camps came later. But the Hindu fascists are doing it all at once. The genocide, whether it's through ethnic cleansing, cultural erasure, or actual mass murder, they're all genocides, is coming faster than you'd expect. Many people are going to say, you're so crazy, it's not that bad yet. Why don't you wait until it's actually that bad before you start complaining about it? Those people are incredibly dumb, learn nothing about history, and need to be ignored. The best time to see the warning signs for this and take action was years ago, but the second best time is right now, before it can be allowed to get any worse. International pressure that backs the ongoing multi-ethnic, multi-religious protests happening across India right now is the only way that this can be stopped. If we in other countries don't react in the strongest possible way to the sacrifices that these protesters are making, the government will simply be allowed to do whatever they want. They're testing what they can get away with geopolitically right now, and they're getting bolder and bolder in their repression as they see no consequences for it. Please, say something. Tell your friends about this, post about it. Anything. The more that we talk about this, the more likely it is that our own governments will be forced to take action. The BJP is in the process of genociding Muslims in India. That is a fact. Do something about it.